2018, after serving as the interim Secretary of State for most of that year. He's led the state through difficult times where election integrity has been a hot topic around the country and has helped run a smooth election through the pandemic. This is Ardoin's last election cycle before a new Secretary of State is elected. So please come on up, Mr. Ardoin.
What, no standing ovation? Well, thank y'all for having me here. It's an honor. Like the governor said the other day when we were in Pineville for the renaming of Camp Beauregard, now to the Louisiana National Guard Training Center, Pineville. He and like I are reminiscent of, we know that as we speak to groups, it's going to be probably the last time we speak to them, obviously as the Secretary of State. So I'm appreciative of y'all having me here. As Shannon said, we did have a remarkable election, a very smooth, calm, quiet election, as most of ours are. I keep stepping on this, so I'm sorry for the... So, as you all know, as Secretary of State, I will, in January, I will be ending my term in office. It has obviously been a lifetime honor to serve in this position, one that I never really thought would happen. In the time since I entered office, every initiative and policy promulgated by our team, every piece of legislation we've backed, every amendment we've supported, it has all been done with the singular goal of election integrity and public trust in mind. The public's continued trust in our elections is the lifeblood of our democracy. It has been my mission to maintain and build this trust for the past 5 years. I have left no room for doubt when it comes to our elections procedures. Louisiana utilizes a top-down approach to administration, preparation, and execution of its elections. Where some other states run their elections on the county levels, our policies and procedures are set by the Secretary of State and flow downstream to our election partners in all 64 parishes. This gives Louisiana much-needed uniformity in our elections. So whether you're voting in St. Tammany, St. Charles, or St. Martin Parish, they will be voting on the same machines, the same system, in the same manner, administered by local officials with the same procedures and tabulation and reporting. Moreover, this system grants my office the ability to quickly and flexibly respond to situations and contingencies as they arise. The uniformity of this process allowed us to create and implement our award-winning Operation Go Vote in 2020 and 2021 in the wake of Hurricanes Laura, Delta, Zeta, and of course Ida, where we mobilized state personnel, resources to provide emergency equipment, move voting precincts, and ensure voters remained informed throughout the aftermath of these devastating natural disasters. We are continuing to build upon this powerful tool. I am proud to say that my office has worked tirelessly with the legislature and the governor to pass bills to strengthen our election integrity. We have banned ballot harvesting and non-citizen voting, and we have banned private and foreign funding of our election administration. This measure was just passed by the people with overwhelming support and majority and carried in all 64 parishes. We banned TikTok from our servers to protect our voter data and from our any handheld devices for any employees. We are getting more accurate information from the Department of Health to keep our voter rolls clean and up to date, and our incoming governor and legislature, I hope, will continue to strengthen this process. We have banned sex offenders from serving as election workers to protect our citizens. We raised the pay for commissioners and passed legislation to allow members of our armed forces from out of state and their dependents to serve as election workers to help ensure their elections have the necessary staff to continue running smoothly. This is to say nothing of the adjustments that we made during the emergency provisions of COVID-19. Can anyone say lots of plans and lots of hearings during COVID? But we did it. In Louisiana, we believe that it should be easy to vote and hard to cheat, and I think we have accomplished just that. Measures like these are why our state is considered a national leader when it comes to elections. Turnout in the October primary was only 36%. We still have one more election this year, so I urge our citizens to research who and what is on their ballot and make plans now to early vote or to show up at the polls on Election Day. Election Day is Saturday, November 18th. But early voting is a bit different this year. Friday, November 3rd through Saturday, November 11th. There will be no voting on Friday, November 10th, as it is a state holiday for our veterans. So remember, we start one day earlier, which is on Friday to November 3rd, and then we end on Saturday, November 11th. In January, Louisiana will have her new Secretary of State. Whomever the voters choose on November 18th, they will have the task of providing steady and stable leadership as Louisiana's chief elections officer. To that end, I would offer them advice. I would hope that they would trust their team and trust themselves. The new secretary will be blessed to have the best staff in the state government behind them, people who carry out the often thankless work of making sure our elections run smoothly. But not to forget our commercial division, which I get compliments about all over the state because we're focused on customer service and helping businesses to be able to run in our state. Not to forget also our archives. We have a dynamite group of people there, new leadership, and it shows. And then don't forget the museums within our system, the old state capitol, the old governor's mansion, Louisiana State Exhibit Museum, and others. It makes the task of filtering the good advice from the bad that much easier. The new secretary will also have to take on the task of finalizing standards for our new state's voting system. This new system will retain technology that makes tabulation accurate and efficient while incorporating a paper component to ensure the integrity and auditability of every vote cast. As elected officials, we are only stewards of our offices. As Secretary of State, it has been my job to preserve and protect our state and our elections. For those who follow me, they also should keep that in mind. It is my hope that I have done just that, kept the state and protected our people and our elections. God willing, our state's elections will be as efficient, accurate, and secure as they are now for generations to come. These past 5 years have been some of the most challenging and rewarding of my life. It has been my honor to serve the people of Louisiana as their 44th Secretary of State. And now I'll be happy to take questions. Yes.
Kyle, how are you feeling about voter turnout with the runoff, and there's no governor's race now? We're expecting it to be really low. From a Secretary of State's perspective, how do you get voters excited or aware that there still needs to be a vote?
Well, I'm not sure I can get them excited about me. Okay. With turnout in the October election, that was low. And the anticipation of even lower turnout because there's no governor's race, or for that matter, lieutenant governor's race on the ballot, how would the Secretary of State get people energized for the election? I think energy for our elections comes from the candidates that are running and the campaigns that are being run. And so because the top two races are now finished and the only thing left is Secretary of State, Attorney General, and Treasurer, all Republican, Democrat versus each other. I think given that it's a November election, I think we're going to see a lower turnout because I don't think that there's going to be much excitement. And we saw some areas of the state that were a little more depressed in turnout than others. And it also depends on local elections. So the more clerk races and sheriff's races that are finished, then I think you see even less turnout because there's no local excitement in the elections.
Were there any parishes that had lower voter turnout than normal that really surprised you for the October election?
Orleans was very surprising as the low turnout it was. Don't ask me the percent. I don't have it in my head. I'm looking over at my staff. But it was surprisingly low. But if you look at Orleans, versus other parishes around the state. Orleans changed their sheriff's race, their clerk, they have 2 clerks, civil and criminal, and assessor. They changed those races to coincide with their local races, so they were all elected last year. So there really wasn't a whole lot on the ballot. And so, that's the way it goes. Yes, sir.
I guess Secretary of State, whether it's federal or state, we see the federal secretary across the world. Have you ever been surprised as Secretary of State when you're outside Louisiana by comments from your fellow Secretary of States or news media that you may recall and would like to share with us?
I'm blank. My colleagues and I, the National Association of Secretaries of State, I served as president for a year. We work well together. We like to exchange ideas, and our goal is to continue in a bipartisan way and not kind of challenge each other on the various issues within our own states. We do sometimes talk about overreaching issues. Obviously, we talked about issues with regards to trust in elections. We are very concerned about the exodus of election workers and their concerns and fears of being part of the process and maybe being chastised because the election didn't turn out one way or the other, depending upon which side you're on. I think one thing that we all say is do not judge the election process by which whether or not your candidate won. If that's the way we're going to judge things, then we've lost already. It's over. And we are very, very concerned about election interference from the Russians. That's a significant process, and they have people all over the world that work to undermine our elections, and they don't care if it's Republican or Democrat. They do it on both sides and play everybody against each other. And so that's the concern that we all have. And then, obviously, what I just said, the trust in the process, learning about the process, but obviously, one pet peeve we have are people that act as if they are elections experts and they've never put on an election. They don't know the nuances of election security. They don't know the nuances of election policy and procedures, and they don't know the law. But they assume that they know, and they apply what happens in one state to other states, and then it's just a hamster on a wheel.
Y'all have any theories about why the turnout was so low in the first round?
I think the one theory that I have is that it just wasn't a very exciting election. There wasn't the combat, if you will, of, a lot of people say Louisiana politics is a contact sport. This race was not very much of a contact sport. Yes?
You mentioned earlier the search for a new voting machine, and you had the Voting Systems Commission for a long time. Obviously, the next Secretary of State will be the ones determining a new voting system. What's kind of your advice from what you've learned in that process, what you learned in that Voting System Commission about how to select those and make the right choice?
Well, it'll have to be through the RFP process. So the next secretary has to determine the new standards by which they're going to operate. That has to go then to the oversight committees for approval, and then they can write the RFP. That's a very delicate spot, but I think the Voting System Commission voted what they want. They want a paper component, but they don't want hand-marked or hand-counted paper ballots. And I think that's the right way to go. And there's a number of competitors out there, and it's just going to depend on how things will fit. And they're going to have to be very mindful of what the new system is and then how we have to change the laws to meet that new system and that new process.
And what advice would you give them going into another presidential election? I know there's a lot of controversy in things said about the 2020 election. So going into 24, what would you give advice on there?
Trust their staff and trust their judgment and make the decisions that are best for the state and not for any one contingency that is pushing back or pushing for something else.
What do you think can be done to make voting easier?
It's pretty darn easy to vote in Louisiana.
I'm going to just give you some comparison that I fairly recently moved to Colorado. The past 10 years, Colorado sent a mail ballot to every voter for every election. It's worked pretty well.
I don't think our people would support that
And why?
because they don't trust. They believe that more paper introduced into the process could potentially create more fraud. And if you're just mailing ballots, I would suggest, there are issues with our voter rolls that we know and we've discussed publicly, and that I've passed legislation in the last 3 years to adjust, and the governor has vetoed them all 3 times. I think the new governor, if the secretary chooses to push that legislation to assist us to get more data and to be able to adjust our rolls appropriately, then you wouldn't have somebody on there for 140 years. I wouldn't want to mail that ballot. I don't know where they are. I don't know if they're alive. And according to the Department of Health, the oldest person in Louisiana is around 110. So somebody's been dead for at least 30 years that still is on the rolls that we can't get off because the federal regulations require certain things. And so we wanted to create a new process.
So you talk about integrity of the ballot.
Yep.
I mean, again, looking back to Colorado, they really had no problems. I mean, why would you not look at something like that if it works? And then, I realize this is a legislative issue.
Well, maybe it works for Colorado. I don't think it would work for us. Yes, sir.
I know it's your job only to count the votes, but I want to ask this to you as an elected statewide official. What does it say about Louisiana that it requires a court to create a second majority black district in the state when the legislature will not?
I'm not going to comment on that because I'm in part of the legal process. But thank you for the question. Yes, sir.
You mentioned poll workers. Has the number of available workers gone down in recent years? And well, as that happens, what are y'all doing to help fix that problem? It doesn't seem like that's going to be something that fixes itself.
No, it's not going to fix itself. And if you think back to the last presidential, we worked very hard, and because of COVID, we worked very hard to recruit new poll workers. There's not the sense in young people today to make that sacrifice of serving as a commissioner for the whole day. The reason why we do that is for the integrity of the process, because if people come and go, then, we think that could create a problem. I think we have to look at innovative ways to get more folks part of the process, and I know that my first assistant has worked on that issue herself. I will tell you it's getting to a point where we're very concerned. As low as turnout was in this last presidential election, we had significant issues around the state where we were, clerks were having to utilize almost their entire staff to work polling locations. And some, instead of 3, we had 2. We can't have just one. So it's a growing issue, and I just wish young people would step up to the plate as, and when I say young, I'm including myself. I mean, most people don't realize, I guess, in your 50s or 60s, I mean, we've got polling workers late 70s, early 80s. I think we even have one that's 94, I believe. And, I'll highlight one who's been, that was in a news article out of Orleans. She's been a poll worker since she started voting. She did it at 18, started at 18 years old, and is still going today. And I believe she's in her late 80s, if I recall correctly. And so I thank her for her service, and God keep her alive for us. We need her. Who's next? Yes, ma'am.
Have you, during your tenure, received any death threats, or has any of your staff?
I wouldn't say death threats. I would say some threats and a lot of intimidation.
And did that affect your decision not to run again?
It was part of it, yes, ma'am. The amount of stress that was placed upon me and my staff, it became a morale problem within our staff. And I'm going to go a little bit further. I think the Voting System Commission, although a good idea in concept, created the very situation that brought about intimidation, harassment, a lot or most of it on social media. But there were door hangers placed on my door and in my entire neighborhood saying inaccurate things about me and my record, almost trying to incite my neighbors to come out against me. But luckily, I live in a small neighborhood, and we all know each other well. And so, you know, and then the social media stuff, I got off completely, but unfortunately, some of my family members didn't early enough. And the staff was, you know, they're social media creatures, and it just became a lot. And it's unfortunate, but it came to a point where the stress became so heavy on me that it began to create health issues for me. And with little JJ just turning 2 in June, my grandson, I want to be around for him. And I don't need another 10 years of my life taking it off. I want to try to get some of that back. And I love public service. I hope, you know, to someday be able to continue or in another capacity at some point. But elective office in this position, in this time and date, and looking to what things may be like next year. And of course, the whole controversy over voting machines and what they may or may not be or may not do because they think this, that, or the other with no factual evidence, that played into my decision as well, because I knew it would be an extremely stressful process to go through. And just for me and my family, I wasn't prepared to go through it again. Oh, wait. Okay. You and then. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you go back to your concerns about the voter rolls? I mean, if you're checking IDs at the polling place, if mail-in ballots have a process that you go through to make sure that they're legitimate, does it matter if a dead person is on the voting rolls?
It does matter if we don't know that they're dead,
But unless they show up to vote as a dead person. You know.
But if you're mailing out a ballot to everybody, somebody's getting that ballot, and they could very well fill it out, sign it, get a witness, and send it back.
Ballots to everybody.
No, it's a request process, and that's where I think we catch potential fraud is the request process. And then when it's returned, we check it again. I think what we're going to have to do very soon, and we were looking into this, but just weren't able to get it off the ground yet, is we need to utilize, because right now all the absentee ballots are hand adjudicated that have questions on them. If there's a question about the signature or the question about the identity or where it came or how it came, I think we need to have electronic signature verification. And right now it's just naked eye verification, which is not a very efficient process and can be subjective. But I think one of the safeguards that we have is that the parish board are the ones that are adjudicating those questionable ballots, so that it's not an electronic process. It's whatever's questionable, and the board looks at it and makes a determination with legal advice from the Attorney General's office. Yes, sir.
Decades ago, I was a poll employee, commissioner, whatever, recruited by, I guess, a poll commissioner, and I did it. Could you tell the Louisiana public while you're on camera what is involved in terms of training, time, et cetera, to become a election worker?
So you go through, you apply to be a commissioner with your local clerk of court. You can do it electronically, or you can print it out and mail it in, whatever you want to do. Then you have to go through a training class to be certified, and then once that's occurred, and it's a yearly process, and so then you become an active certified commissioner, and then the clerk picks you and assigns you a polling location, and then you work a 12 to 14-hour day, and you get just this huge check at the end of the election.
And you work under
You work under a commissioner in charge. There has to be one commissioner in charge for every precinct, and sometimes we up the pay because we will utilize it when we're in need. We'll utilize a commissioner in charge for 2 polling locations if they're in the same physical location. Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the voting system commission, do you regret allowing people like Mike Lindell to come and speak publicly? Do you feel that that took the narrative away from the safe elections that you have been trying to push at that time?
I think the narrative ended, for the most part, when I removed myself from the election process. And that was also part of my decision as well. I said on a podcast recently, sometimes you have to make decisions bigger than yourself. I mean, it was a very emotional decision. But when I removed myself from the election, the trajectory of the discussions and the narrative changed almost 180 degrees. You still had fringe talking about it, but the masses of people didn't believe that. And I think it shows that Louisiana citizens rejected that narrative. As far as the Voting System Commission, I think it, as I said earlier, I think it created the platform for all of that. I think the other issue and the reason why the Voting System Commission was created was because, again, the legislature likes to, or the current legislature likes to micromanage. And it's kind of frustrating when you're elected statewide, and I might add I was elected with more votes than John Bell got in the runoff, that we then have microcosms of legislators who are wanting to micromanage every aspect. And they always had the authority to approve the contract or not approve the contract, but they went further and they created this commission, which then created the onslaught of only negative people speaking. After the fact, once individuals found out what they were pushing and what might happen, they started pushing back, and you started seeing the trajectory change. But by that time, it was my decision had already been made. I made it public. I was final with it. I had become secure in that decision, and that's when things started changing. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Have you had a problem with coworkers getting harassed in any form?
Not that I'm aware of. Just maybe a few here or there, and it just depends on where they are. You know, I will tell you, luckily we passed legislation to protect our commissioners, their addresses and everything, because we started having campaigns asking for that in advance. And so as quickly as we could, we wanted to change that law and protect them. Because, you know, they could put pressure on them to do things. So that was concerning.
Does Louisiana allow representatives of the parties in precincts while voting is going on?
Candidates can have watchers. Parties can have super watchers, which means they get a certificate and they can move around a certain area. But they can only come in and out. They can't stay. Anyone else?
Did you ever foresee a day where we could have same-day registration in Louisiana, or even eliminating registration entirely? I mean, if I have a photo ID that says I'm old enough to vote and I live in the right precinct, could one day I just vote with that without being registered?
Well, that's part of the problem that same day registration. I would never recommend that. I don't think that is a step that would. I think that there would be more possibility for fraud, and I'm going to tell you why. And let me back up. I don't want to say outright fraud. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are people exercising a right to vote in the wrong district. If they move and they haven't yet changed their driver's license, then they could potentially go and vote in another precinct. Or if they moved out of a town or a city, then they could go back into that town and city and vote. And we will probably this coming election experience some voter challenges. I've been notified through Street Talk that the concern is that people are living outside the parish and they're voting in the parish, and they still have an address in the parish. And I think all of this is because of hurricanes and floods and things like that. So it's unfair to the people who live in one district and that people are voting in that district that shouldn't be voting in that district. And that's a problem that we have that the next secretary's got to deal with Office of Motor Vehicles. They need to be the individuals who are helping people change their address on their licenses or get new licenses should be required, and really are required, but they're just not following through to make sure that voter registration is changed when they change their address. The other issue is the next secretary should get with the Assessors Association and try to figure out a way where we could get a list of homestead exemptions in each parish, because by law, a voter is required to vote where they have their homestead exemption. The other issue is if you don't have a homestead exemption and you're poor and you move quite often, the one thing that's not helping is that people are not necessarily submitting, and I think it's just a sign of the times, they aren't submitting address changes through the Postal Service. If you're poor or if you're rich and you've got a lot of bill collectors coming after you, are you going to submit that form so that everything comes at you? Or a lot of people are tired of junk mail, and so when they do move, they don't submit anything to the national change of address, through the national change of address, and so we're not getting accurate information. And so those are challenges not just in Louisiana, those are challenges all over the country. And when you're paying bills online, you don't really you want less paper than in your mailbox than anything. So those are all challenges that the next secretary is going to face, and I think that election administrators all across the country face. Is that it?
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank y'all very much. God bless.